so I wonder if I should switch mine.
Or you could flip it in the edit.
I could do that, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right. Thanks for coming into my studio, George. And by coming to my studio, I mean spending some time talking with me over the internet.
Yep, get all into that.
Yeah, really excited to talk with you about your business as a professional YouTuber. So I hope that you're ready for my questions.
Yeah, I think so.
I'd shake your hand, but I don't know how to do that through the screen, so we'll just have to, do the nod or whatever. So why don't you start by giving me a brief statement about who you are and what you do?
Okay, so my name is Georg Rockall-Schmidt, and I call myself a writer, which may look a bit weird because what I'm doing is writing chiefly for the stuff I'm putting out over my YouTube channel through the illustrious channel of YouTube. Everyone knows so well. I have a background in film, which I guess that with my slightly antisocial nature brought me towards YouTube because I can be on my own and make films or make videos.
Right.
And yeah, you said professional YouTuber. I guess professional kind of means I'm making money off it, which I'm not.
That's true.
I'm more of an unsuccessful YouTuber. I consider myself an early YouTuber. Maybe that'd be kinder for me to say.
Yeah, you're in the startup stage. You're kickstarting yourself without actually having Kickstarter funds. You're kind of just making your way at a rate that you hope will launch you up into the actual professional realm.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about this, but what I did was I saved up enough money to live where I live, which is the south of Mexico, for hopefully a couple of years.
Right.
So YouTube is really the only thing I do. So maybe I'm not a professional YouTuber, but
you're a full-time YouTuber.
I'm a full-time YouTuber. Yeah, let's say that.
No, I can't remember if this is a true statistic anymore, but I'm going to throw it up there anyway because no one will be able to prove me wrong. But I think it's like 1,000 videos are generated every second or something crazy like that. So,
yeah, like it's something like 250 hours or uploaded every minute or something. Yeah,
it's crazy. So that makes sense that you chose that. It's good to hear it from you directly because I also agree that YouTube is the best platform to deliver video, and as an artist myself and someone who is an avid film fan, I think video is a great way to connect with people, and you're just proving that point right now by having this interaction with me. When is the best time for you to dig in and discover?
I think it might have been Douglas Adams, but I don't know, who said the enemy of creativity or the enemy of fun is a schedule. And it's definitely true. It's just kind of the reality of my situation that I have to go through one. I mean, for me, it's kind of like when destiny is looming. That's when the spark happens, when it's kind of crunch time.
But there is some merit to it, and I can't remember. I wrote an article about this a while back, and I can't remember specifically where I went with it. But the idea is that when you procrastinate, in a lot of cases, you're forcing yourself to disregard all the nonsense you would do when you went at a decent pace.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a very good point.
At the end of the show, that's the one who experiences the best character growth because they had somewhere to go with it. So, we engage with that.
It does make sense, yeah. But they had the best character growth because they were lacking.
Yeah.
Like the good girl who didn't have to worry because she got it in on time. Didn't need to grow because she was fine.
Okay, fair enough.
So what we're saying is don't procrastinate. Be perfect.
Yeah, so either have absolutely no redeemable qualities or be perfect.
You've got to eat the crust of the sandwich before you get into the juicy centre, haven't you? I mean, everyone has to do that.
That's right.
If you're a director on set, you're going to have to direct the cutaways that you don't really care about or aren't very creative. They're just by the numbers sort of thing,
Or like a good example, you could be Channing Tatum and you do your, your Nicholas Sparks movie to get paid, and then you'll do your 21 Jump Street for fun.
Yeah. I could be Channing Tatum.
Yeah.
I like the idea that he did the Nicholas Sparks?
Yeah.
He did that to do 21 Jump Street, which is, the pinnacle of film art.
Yeah, exactly.
If Channing Tatum from now on just does really shit movies for 10 years, and then at the end he says, well, I've saved up all my money, I've got $80 million, and now I'm going to make a black and white movie entirely in French.
Yeah.
That would change my opinion of him. That'd be like, wow, good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, we'll hold that.
Okay.
We'll put a pin in that.
Yep.
And then 10 years from now, we'll come back.
Yeah. And he will be the greatest director who's ever lived.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How do you know when your work is satisfactory?
You have to kind of have a level of self-awareness, and not just self-awareness, just awareness as well, and be able to look at what you've made as objectively as you can and think to yourself, is that good enough?
Right.
Because I'm sure, if you asked the world, do you have a high level of work? Is your work high quality? I'm sure 90% of people would say yes. But I think that's because they can't really honestly tell.
So Woody Allen produces I don't know, produces and directs. He's probably made over 40 movies at this point in his career, but
40 autobiographies.
Exactly. So if you think about that for a second, you'd have to wonder. I mean, the guy's supposedly incredibly neurotic, but you have to wonder if he's putting out that volume of work, he must have some willingness to let go of things and, expose aspects of himself to the world. So
otherwise, he'd be re-editing his movie for 4 years at a time.
And it's so easy to get caught up in tiny details that really no one will care about. I did something where I did a small film with someone, and there was a bit in a kitchen where you could see like half of a fridge, and you could see the lettering that goes on a fridge, like fridge magnets, right?
Yeah.
And it was a tiny shoot, and we didn't have a continuity person. And at the end of the day, like just before we wrapped, the director noticed that the fridge magnets had changed, but not even a lot, like just a little bit, like somebody had nudged them or something. And they insisted on reshooting this scene, like 3 different shots.
We were talking about Good Will Hunting. It's like the pears versus the apples sequence.
Yeah.
It was intentional, but the average person probably wouldn't notice it. But the film critic or the savant or the autistic person or artistic person, they would notice it, right? So
yeah,
but it's for them. It's intentional.
Yeah.
So
and the scene wasn't built around that.
Exactly. It's just an anecdote inside the scene. So
yeah, it even so happened that in the script they said, let's have pears instead of apples.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or maybe, and I think probably more likely, like when they were shooting it, someone said, what about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. If knowledge is power, who do you think is holding all of the cards?
I don't think knowledge is power. I think power is power.
Mm-hmm.
I think knowledge can be useful.
Who's holding all the cards, right? If knowledge is a deck of cards, I think there's probably 51 unknown cards. I think maybe somebody is holding like a corner of a card somewhere. I don't think anyone has that much knowledge. Really. Yeah. Oh, do you think knowledge is power?
Do I think knowledge is power? No,
Yeah.
I actually think knowledge is a means to power. I think influence is power.
Yes.
And I think influence can be learned, so knowledge is a means to that.
Yeah. If you look at Lydia, who was Augustus's wife,
Mm-hmm.
The knowledge she had was essentially the knowledge of how to manipulate people and how things work.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right, it's something you can learn, but I think you have to have a natural aptitude for it.
Mm-hmm.
Really.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fascinating thing, and I've spent a lot of time of my own personal time in that mindset because I've discovered this, that, and I talk about this on timotheories all the time, but being a creative professional is not simply being creative. It requires you to have skills that some people, and to your point, if you don't share yourself as an example of a skill, if people don't learn those skills, they won't achieve their goals and ambitions and passions and things.
Well, I think most cliches are probably kind of true. But I guess most cliches are generalizations as well, so maybe they're kind of true, but not always true.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it wouldn't have the same ring to it, would it, if it was knowledge is power? If you can apply that knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you have an avenue to use it. Yeah, you can have all these caveats.
Absolutely.
What is credibility, and why do you need to care?
I think you can be seen as credible and not be credible at all, and vice versa, or vice versa. What was the question? Why should you care?
Why do you need to care?
Why do you need to care? I think credibility is probably what most people, creative or not, need to care about the most in a professional sense. I've known people who are arseholes, right? I've known people who are horrible people, but people still decide to work for them or work with them. They still decide to hire them and engage them because they've got professional credibility.
It can create a situation where you lose yourself in that role if you're not careful, I think.
It's a complete requirement for a lot of stuff. I mean, you can't be a likable, approachable, I'll bend the rules for you policeman. You need credibility for not almost everything, but a lot of stuff. But as much as I think I can mess about and people might not, I don't know, not respect me, but people, I might not be a complete professional in the work environment, let's say. I would hope that people think my work is credible.
I'm glad that you took a different approach to it, because there are different ways to look at that question. And to your point, whether you're a creative professional or not, it is important to think about that, right?
The thing I always think of is Mozart. You must have heard about the poem he wrote about, I can't remember what it was, but it was something about taking a shit. It was.
I think, yeah.
Yeah. It was like a really coarse poem, like 4 lines long, and people have said, oh well, but back in the day and in the language, this would have been beautiful or whatever. But that isn't true. It's a joke. It's like a lyric, right? Like there was a young lady in Ealing or something. Maybe, I don't think so, but maybe that knocks Mozart's credibility as a serious person who was toiling away all the time on his music. But it doesn't disrupt the credibility of his music at all.
No.
I don't think.
But people get so excited about the opportunity to meet someone that they believe credible. And then when they meet that person, they're disappointed, but they still can enjoy the art. So that's a very poignant thing. It speaks a lot to the ability of art to be a lens to the world, but also a very personal thing to the audience.
I think probably with acting, that's most true. If you look at Daniel Day-Lewis, who's incredibly famous for getting into these very meaty roles, the perception people have of him is one of someone who is all about the art, who is quite reclusive otherwise, but puts himself forward into these things incredibly passionately. But the reality is we don't know anything about him. We can't make a judgment on him at all.
No, just on his art.
Just on his art, yeah. And sure, there'll be reflections of himself in that, probably. But I don't think you necessarily know what they are.
How does one go about establishing credibility quickly?
I don't think you do. I think that credibility has to be built up over quite a long time. I think credibility has to be forged by struggle and failure. I think you can become credible to people, to individuals, fairly quickly, but I think to an audience it takes a while.
I don't want to get too presumptuous here, but when you engaged with me and I engaged with you, I felt like there was something that we could both benefit from having a conversation, and that's why I approached you doing an interview. And it says a lot, I think, to your credibility that I was able to engage you and have a conversation with you. As a rather intuitive person, I generally will get a sense of someone, even if I can't meet them in person from their art, I can get a pretty good sense of them. So it's just fortunate that your art features you in it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I know what you mean, and it's so weird kind of thinking that, because there are people I talk to on Twitter who I guess follow what I do on YouTube, and it's so weird because I have brief conversations with them on Twitter, and I always think I have no idea if you're a man or a woman even.
It could be a good moment for your Just a Thought series.
Yeah. Realizing I'm trapped in YouTube or something.
For eternity, or until the internet turns off.
I think I'll probably be on the internet until probably about 2021, where someone buys YouTube and liquidates it or something, right?
Right.
I think you've got you've got all these people who think they're going to be online forever, and or maybe they'll just be a big magnet that goes over the servers or something.
Yeah, that'd be funny.
Yeah, everything gone in an instant.
No, that's a good point. I mean, you said the same thing of me, right? You're like, well, I watched quite a few of your videos, and I got an impression of you.
Yeah.
So that's the amazing thing about art. I think it can connect people in interesting ways. Who have been your major influencers on your journey to credibility?
People say, who's influenced you? And then people really just list their favourite artists or writers or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think I've probably been influenced by a lot of people who weren't artists or who didn't have anything to do with videography at all. I think really my biggest influences are people I've met who I thought aren't credible, who I've disliked, and who I thought, I don't want to be like you.
That doesn't mean I don't respect certain people. There are a lot of people I do respect, but I don't necessarily want to be like them. I think genuinely, not just for me, most people's influences are invisible.
That's a really candid response, because,
like you said, a lot of people will say it's such and such a person who's a huge, substantial, creative business professional or whatever. But I've struggled with that too, and I at various points I've listed family members for whatever reason, but not because they are my hero, but because it was a response that felt a little bit more, I don't know, realistic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so, certainly no one on YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's not what you're making. You're not trying to generate that kind of content. You just are up against it.
Yeah, that's right. I'm an alien in New York, but in YouTube.
Yeah. Where can you expect to see yourself in the next few years? Yeah.
Well, what is a typical response?
Well, let's say, good example. You're living in a well-populated city. You just finished your undergraduate degree. You want to become any number of creative professions. So your goal is, in the next few years, I'm going to start to sell my art. I'm going to go back to school and get my master's. Then I'm going to move to another country. Like, that's a pretty standard response.
Right, okay.
But you did that, but like in a different sequence.
Because God knows that's what I like to do. Being a deviant. Right. I mean, the one thing I know I don't want to do, no matter what happens, or I wouldn't be able to do, is kind of go back to work. Which a lot of people do, and which I did. Where they have to kind of work part-time to support their art. And I don't think I could go back to that and be okay with it. I get that maybe one day I'll have to do it, but I don't think I will do it. I think I'll probably go on an adventure where I live as a down and out for 6 months or something.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So you'll be living on the streets, sleeping in bus shelters, things like that for a little while.
That's what's going to happen to me in a few years. Yeah, I'll be living on the streets. I'll become one of those weird regulars in a bus shelter.
Okay.
Not just a guy. Be like, why don't you ask Weird George?
He'll tell you a story about living in Mexico.
Yeah, which no one will believe.
Yeah.
Because I'll always have like a can of really strong cider in my hand.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, we joke, but that is something that could happen. I don't have an income, and I certainly don't really have any office skills, or I could get a job as a manual labourer or something, but I don't really have any skills someone would want to hire me for, I don't think.
Right.
Well, it sounds like you've done that before. Previously, you found job opportunities from your education. Yep. So opportunities present themselves. You just have to hustle a bit.
Yeah, and I had a good job before I quit it to do this. They wanted me back in London. I think they offered me about 40 grand to go back.
Well, there you go.
But I decided to eat rice and beans instead. I have to say I don't regret it at all.
What is the relationship between trust and vulnerability in a digital age?
The adage is art is propaganda, which is true, but everything is propaganda. Everything is created as propaganda, even if it is factual. It's presented through a prism, of someone's viewpoint, even if ever so slightly, and that makes it propaganda. I suppose the good thing about the digital age at the moment is you can have different things that exist at once. So you can have someone's interpretation of a news story, which is contradictory to other things. So at the moment, I suppose you've got this diversification of what people trust.
I mean, there's so much written from perspectives that wouldn't have existed 20 years ago, or would have existed as fringe magazines, conspiracy magazines, and things like that. But there's so much of it now; it's almost a mainstream of itself.
Right. So, in some ways, vulnerability is fractured. When we talk about the concepts of empathy and sympathy, people are empathetic when they can understand you, right? So, in some ways, empathy feels less so because there's these divergent and diversified communities that exist now, so people can't necessarily relate to each other. Although I would argue that they couldn't before. We just had this thing called common sense floating around.
Yeah. I remember that.
Right.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I mean, people have always formed themselves into tribes. Which is essentially what this is. I think a great example of this is probably nerd culture. Where it's cool to be a nerd. And that has come about because of the digital age. Because, to be a real nerd, not just someone who's a bit geeky, but to be a real nerd, I think is fairly rare.
Which has been proliferated by non-nerds.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, they're not real nerds.
No. Because you have to be alienated. You have to be alienated to be a nerd.
Yeah, right, by the nature of what it is.
And that's the thing about the digital age. It's got these people together. They can communicate and they can say, oh, well, I thought it was just me who wanted to do this, but I'll see you at the park on Saturday.
Yeah.
Or whatever. So as well as kind of, fracturing people's opinions and beliefs, it's also united people.
that's why I said it fractures vulnerability, because
Right.
you have to be vulnerable in a completely different context, and you seek it out in a way too. You say, well, this isn't for me, so I'll go and be vulnerable where someone gets me. But that's right. Like, nerd culture as an instance is not something that, at its core, it's not truly representative of that fracture, I think.
And why do you think that is?
Because it's not indicative of what people actually care about. It's a hype machine.
I think you. Yeah, that's right. That's a very good way of putting it. I think. It's kind of like hipster culture, where hipster culture is actually anti-hipster culture. Like, a real hipster is an anti-hipster.
That's right.
You know, and a real nerd is not part of this nerd culture.
And you know, not to put a nice little bow tie on the end of the interview, but, you know, going back to what you're aspiring towards, you know, building community is difficult. Building community without physical relational space, I think, is even more difficult. So, I mean, I have to applaud the fact that you're doing something difficult, sort of against the grain, and you're just in the short time that we've interacted with each other, I've seen progression from you. So I would say that, again, just keep doing it, right?
And I think that's probably the most important thing. You know, obviously, what you have needs to be good, but you need to keep doing it. You know, if you're a painter or a sculptor, it's pretty unlikely that you're going to sculpt something, even if it's great, and that's going to be it for you. You know, you can take that one sculpture to an art gallery or something and make your name. You're probably going to have to do quite a lot of that.
Yeah.
Before you get anyone who's interested.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's perseverance.
I think you can build community anywhere, but it's important to be conscious of your local community. So I appreciate you being, like I said, the first person to kind of reach out to me in an international capacity and want to collaborate. So
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me, Tim.
yeah, you're welcome. All right. Well, I guess that's it. So I'll talk to you next time. Like I said, I can't shake your hand, but I'll pretend to. So, and that's it. So we're done.